So I promised at the beginning we would do a simulation of ransomware to see, like, not just put it to theory, but put it to application. So all the numbers we looked at before now have been real numbers, but they're theoretical in that we have not applied them in an exercise or simulation. We said, like, this is what organizations can do or get. So I want to look at us pretending to be a ransomware group and see how well it works for us. So this goal is kind of show again why cyber criminals do what they do. So we got to start with setting our assumptions and parameters for our simulation. Um, we're going to pretty much start with just you and me in this organization. So congratulations, you are now an accomplice. But we will need to outsource a lot of what we're going to do. I assume that you or and me are not developers. We do not know how to make ransomware. So we are going to get off the shelf, leased or rented stuff. Like most businesses, we are going to use a January 1 to December 31st calendar as a standard fiscal calendar, mostly because it makes this data a lot easier to understand. I'm going to assume that ransomware organizations don't necessarily follow GAP principles. I actually don't know that one way or the other, but for the purposes of the simulation, it just makes it easier to make the data make sense. We're not going to bother negotiating. Uh, it's not really commonly done. It's also too much effort and adds too much complexity to this exercise. So we're going to assume a very linearly decreasing success assumption. So our successes are just going to kind of fall at a standard rate. We're also not going to do any exfiltration or secondary attacks. While these are fairly common for the purpose of this, we're focusing on ransomware, not on data exfiltration, not on blackmail, not on extortion, just to show what they can make just on this. Um, we're also going to say that we're new to this, so we're not going for an extended campaign. We're just going to get in and get out. So we're also going to assume that our attacks are not going to be very successful. So I'm going to set our attacks be lower than the industry average. So kind of how this works, it's just going to be you and I. So we're considered at best an informal hacking group. Um, And if you bail on me, I guess just me and then we're a sole provider. We're going to purchase 12,000 access credentials from an IAB on the dark web using cryptocurrency. Then we're going to rent some ransomware from a RAS service, also on the dark web. Then we're going to methodically attack everyone on our credential list using the tools that we've rented and leveraging them with RAS and paired with our purchased access. Any successful attacks we get through pay or they don't. We're not going to negotiate. We're not going to go digital mile. We're just going to say, we hit you with ransomware, pay us money to take it off. So here's how it actually works out. So of our 12,000 attempted attacks, 467 of these attacks were successful, but did not pay. Of the 12,000 attacks, 168 were successful and did pay. So these are not made up numbers. These are actually based on legitimate rates of attack. We actually brought our rate a little bit lower for the purposes of saying we're just not very good at this. Though please don't check my math too much. I am not great at math. That's why I went into IT. I don't want to redo my slides again. But saying that of our attacks, we saw earlier our median our median ransom was $60,000. So we're going to assume we actually make in $30,000 per attack. So of 138 successful attacks times $30,000, our revenue is about $5 million for the year. So that's pretty good. Actual cost to us for 12,000 credentials is about $840. That's like a legitimate number. Renting RAS, so ransomware as a service, is about $1,000 a month, or about $12,000 for the year. So calculating our profit, we earned about $5,040,000 minus our costs of $12,840. So for the year, we brought in $5,027,000 and $5,027,160 in profit. So that's straight up, no regulatory costs, no compliance, no taxes. So that is not bad for just doing a year of crime. So if, say, I were doing this for real, which I'm not, I would very likely hit that and get out. $5 million would set most people up for life. Um, it'd be kind of hard to prove where you got that money is a legitimate source, but in some places they don't care. So you take your $5 million and you're done. If you make it through the year without being caught, you probably won't be caught. You move to a non-extradition country if you're not already in one, and you live very well. So for fun, I decided to make a few reports that most companies would do, like a P&L, a cash flow, and a couple of analysis. I'm not going to spend too much time on these. They're kind of boring and don't really show a lot of useful data. If you want to pause and look at these closer, that's totally fine. I'll be paused, and what am I going to care? Um, so looking at P&L, you can kind of see how each month of revenue does steadily decrease, ending in our 2025 year with about $5,027. You can see it kind of goes up here. Our net profit margin is just being rounded off a bit here. So net profit goes up in general. You can kind of see how our net profit goes down over the years, just because over the months, because we technically earn less per month. So actually, a scary part of this was when I was running, when I was making these slides and getting some information, I ran it through an AI to find errors with my information and to make sure that I was saying things correctly, my grammar was good, um, and I just had my numbers correct. And what it flagged for me was that my assumption, going back a slide, of a steady decline of success rate is not accurate. The AI says that in most cases that my because my original assumption was that over a year credentials would no longer be viable due to password resets, due to accounts being turned off, due to other people attacking the account, things like that. My tools not being as effective due to improving security measures, um, that sort of thing. But the AI actually said, declining success rate is too pessimistic based on real world data. So what that means is that my real world data is actually assuming a lower profit than the real world would see. So I was actually being too conservative or too pessimistic with my results. So you would actually see these numbers being higher than what they are. Was kind of an interesting idea. So looking at like their balance sheet, it's gonna be the same number across the board. It just shows money go up, which for a criminal enterprise is what they want to see. Assuming they're not spending any of this money. Because like realistically, if they were tracking their expenses over, like we're tracking this expenses to do with the attack over the year. If they started tracking, like I bought a car, we would see some variables in here. But they're not buying company cars because it's not a real company, so it's kind of not showing up in this information. And of course, our cash flow at the end is showing numbers go up. So this really report really just shows what we started with each month, and at the end of the year, at the end of the month, what we had. In a real business, this is useful for showing that the business is making money over time. So your trend of money change. So you kind of want it as a business to show that your net change in cash is generally positive. Because if it's negative, it means you're doing bad, and you have a real risk of going insolvent or having to declare bankruptcy or not being able to pay your bills. So you want your cash to be positive. Uh, for a criminal enterprise, as we've seen here, this really just tracks how much money we started with and how much we ended with. Um, if there are errors in my reports, please don't tell my accounting teacher from 20 years ago. I really did not want to take that class again. It was not my strongest suit. I used software to help me make these reports, and I put we're kind of using accounting software not for what I was intended to do here. So I kind of did my best. Uh, if you do see an error in here, it would be nice if you flag it to me just so I can improve my report, improve my presentation in the future. But and what this all comes down to at the end of all this presentation, you can see that ransomware very much makes financial sense if you're willing to get into a life of crime or even a short period of crime, unfortunately. It's not just a life of it. You can just dabble in it and get out. Um, but be aware, of course, if for some reason my slideshow has made you consider this as an option, that some countries will kill you for doing this. It's rare, but it does happen. And a number of ransomware operators are spending their life in jail. So they will probably never see daylight again. But even with those risks, it is a continually growing threat um, because of the promise of a lot of money. Sometimes they're in an area where that money can be life changing for the better, where they can't afford food or healthcare. So that is where that comes from. Sort of same thing as you see with like robberies and drugs and a lot of violence. When an area, a state, a city, a country, or what have you, uh, is impoverished, and the only way to get money to feed your family is crime, then crime goes up. Um, Ransomware is, if you can get into it, is very profitable, very low risk. Uh, Unfortunately, ransomware is often just a start of the story, really. As for the business side, even when the victims pay, their bleeding does not stop. Extortion, regulatory investigations, reputation loss, business disruptions, and a litany of other nightmares will likely plague a victim company for years. Um, Something like 60% of businesses that experience ransomware will go out of business within a year. Um, I've seen that number tossed a lot. I'm never quite sure on why it calculates that way. I never dug too much into it, but it's kind of a scary number to look at. For some businesses, ransomware will be not that big a deal. Like if you run a landscaping company and ransomware hits your files, it's not that big a deal because you probably have the people, your business people, like your people that your customers in your contacts on your phone. Not a big deal. If you're a bank, ransomware is extraordinarily bad. Um, Also to be said, while this does sound very bleak and something you can do about it, there is really also always something to be done. You can take measures to prevent this outcome as best you can, much like fire, flood insurance. You don't want these things to happen to your business, to your home, to your family, but you take measures to prevent this. You make sure maybe not live in a flood zone, not always an option, but you get flood insurance. For fire, you make sure you tell your kids don't play with fire lighter or like lighters and don't play with matches. You have fire extinguishers and fire detectors, and potentially your automatic suppression systems like sprinklers and things. We can do the same sort of thing on the cybersecurity side. You have working with groups like mine to prevent it using various tools that detect it, hands-on abilities of people like me who work with your company to do our best to find and prevent this from ever happening. So find the holes and prevent them so the bad guys can't get in and they move on to easier targets. Uh, Realistically, we all need to work together to make ransomware unprofitable and so risky that's just not viable anymore. I will continue going back to that point because if you really want a long term solution to this problem, that is really what you got. Because what it comes down to is the problem is not the tools in the cybersecurity itself. 70, I think, for 70% of attacks are not from an attacker getting through your firewall. It's from user interaction. It's from someone clicking an email and allowing the attack to commence or to give it credentials that it will use. It bypasses the firewall in the cybersecurity technology level entirely by attacking the human. As humans do not necessarily operate perfectly like cybersecurity measures, They will function the same way every time that a process is run, as long as the input is the same. With a human, we have bad days, we have memory problems, we have too much caffeine and not enough sleep. Uh, so we will make mistakes. So that is really what it comes back to, is making it so long term is not enough money in it to, like, we just don't pay, so they'll stop doing it. It's enough money, not enough money to make it worth that risk, but also working with our teams to educate them to not to be smarter, to not necessarily be smarter, but identify these risks and seeing, like, this is legitimately a problem that I can have, so I need to watch for these. A lot of people will ignore this risk by just saying, "I'm not the target. It won't happen to me. My company isn't doing anything that's worth it." And that's just not the case. The the reality is, these companies, or the companies, these organizations are targeting everyone in a list. What they will commonly do is they will use a compromise of, like, a data broker or a large company. They'll get in and get their database and just send it to every email in that database of a phishing attack to see what credentials they get back, and then move from there. And they'll get in, once they get into your system, they go for your contacts and spread it to your contacts in your email, which is a double problem of it's spreading them. They get more contacts that are somewhat like warm leads, but also now that they're sending it from your email using your contacts, is very much exposing you and your company to that liability as well. So, coming back on topic, uh, what do you do about this? First, have good backups. This is what I've seen be one of the most successful ways of recovery, because it's hard to prevent ransomware if companies are not taking it seriously, their staff are not taking it seriously, they're not really going like, yeah, this is a legitimate issue that we need to be aware of and educated on. If you cannot get to that, you have to have good backups. That means these backups have to be immutable, means they cannot be changed. They have to be tested. That means when you recover from that backup, it works. They have to be off-site. Because if these are not true, when you need that backup, it may not work, and you're in a really bad situation where you think like, yeah, my lifeboat is good, but there's no lifeboat there. Now you're in a real problem. So when cybersecurity fails, when people fail, backups are what saves you. Second, improving your detection and response. Working with reputable organizations to audit your defenses, finding gaps in your configuration or misconfigurations, and just making it harder for threat actors to get in. Make it so annoying that they have to move on somewhere else. Because in most cases, these groups are not sustaining their attack. They fire out these emails or their attempts, and if they get no response, they move on. Um, so it's making it so that, like, mail filtering, or some sort of DLP, or link scanning, safe linking, various ways of detecting and preventing these from getting to your people. And if they do get to your people, being able to handle it so it doesn't get any further, and compartmentalizing the risk so that it doesn't become a ransomware event in the first place. Third and last, educating your people. I will harp on that all day. Cybersecurity really comes down to people. Um, Most successful attacks, like I said, start with a link in an email. Uh, so teaching people how to identify these, there are a thing called SATs, security awareness training. Many insurance companies now require this to be part of your cybersecurity program. In many cases, unfortunately, I've seen the SATs being deployed and then not followed up on. So, like, someone will spend like $1,000 a month to have SAT or security awareness training for their company, but then no one does it. So you're just spending money for a false sense of security that no one's doing. So that's not great. So make sure that you follow up with your people and audit those, so that say, yeah, we have security awareness training going out to my team, and they are watching these videos or this training in whatever fashion it is. I will admit some trainings are better than others. I've seen a number of them that are just god-awful boring, and I was like, "I wouldn't watch that either." But there are some really good ones out there. I'm not gonna name names because 'cause I'm not being sponsored for this video. Um, but there are some good ones out there that do make it more enjoyable, and training is very rarely enjoyable unless you're a nerd like me, then, have at. Um, but as a business, and as people in a business being either managers or leaders or staff, we have to do what's right for our business in like doing those hard things. Like sometimes we don't want to go to work. We want to sleep in, but we go to work. Sometimes we don't want to watch trainings, but if it helps prevent issues with our business and potentially the disruption or dissolution of our business, that training should be part of your of your duties. Especially because threat actors are constantly the bad guys are constantly changing their attacks, the way they come at us. Uh, so periodic training, I kind of recommend like a monthly thing. Most of these are like 10 minutes per month that update you on new attacks. Most of these are not really technical. They're like, this is how you identify this sort of thing. This is what you do if you see this. This is what happens if you get caught by this. So you know how to respond intelligently. So I really think that education is sort of the best measure. Um, Having a baseline of cybersecurity defenses is definitely good because you don't be just like all open. But once you have a baseline in place, education and training should be your next step before going crazy on like expensive cybersecurity products. I'm not gonna say you shouldn't have those, but your cost of benefit is definitely in education before you get into other tools. So at the end, we've made it through all the way to the end, so great. Gold star, I guess. So I'll do my little pitch here at the end. My company, I'm John Miller. I'm with Argus Cybersecurity and Support, and we would be happy to help your business stay safe and operational. Feel free to contact us. We're happy to talk. Obviously, I don't know how long this recording is. It's an hour and a half. I'm happy to talk. If you just have questions, you want to tell me about your day, just chat. I am free to talk. It will not hurt my feelings if you want to ask me some questions. A lot of these free consults are totally fine. Um, you can see our contact information on screen. If you'd like to know more about what we do, talk cybersecurity, contact us. Otherwise, thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you next time.